I was really lucky to work on a game like RimWorld Console Edition. Can we take what's great about the PC version and the way you can control it, and can you map that to a controller? Is it going to be fun? Are we going to match how great it is on PC? At Double 11 I'm a producer, but before I came to Double 11, my experience was creating software startup companies. And in that I would usually come up with the idea and then the product design, and then when the product launched I was part of the UI and UX. I was doing that for about 10 to 15 years. As I moved into the game industry, I was doing the day-to-day duties of a producer and loved that. When I got to do the evaluation on RimWorld, I was able to use all of that past experience that I had around UI and UX and bring that to the porting process. There's this massive expectation and this brilliance that the PC version has in the way that people can interact with the colonists on the screen, the way they can dig into the story. So when it comes to RimWorld, we had to first and foremost just get a controller in our hand and say, if I needed to do that, what would I press? How would it feel? One of the most talented programmers that I've probably ever worked with, a guy called Matt Phillips. His role in the game was to look at all of the challenges that we need to overcome in terms of hardware limitations, looking at the code base and kind of deep diving into it to make sure that that would be compatible for console. Every element of it, the way that the functions were called, the way that the engine worked, kind of tick of the game went over to make sure that was possible on console too. Him as the lead programmer and me from a producer side of things would work and think like, what team do we need to make this game happen? How long will it take us? What became clear was just how well tuned the UI is. It's perfectly built for keyboard and mouse. It's so easy to move around and all of the information is pinned to the outside of the screen so you can enjoy the story, but you can get to everything really quickly. Because you're close to the screen, there's no problem kind of looking for the architect menu through to the history menu, and your head barely moves. Everything's accessible and really quick. When we started to evaluate this from a console point of view, you realise that all of those interactions are completely different. So this was an early prototype that was developed during the evaluation phase. And what we initially tried to do was to put the menus across the bottom. We wanted to copy off the PC basically and just move everything to the outside and then map it to the controller. And we knew right away that if we planned a menu system around these shoulder buttons, we would be able to mimic what the PC version does. We had this really nice proposed controller layout and we were able to work with it. Just pressing the LB button, you're able to kind of bring up these menus and then jump to each section. So here I'm moving through the architect menu and finding all the different tools. We've organised it in a way that's much more controller friendly. We were able to see and actually get hands-on with how these menu systems would work. We could tell that the game was possible on console, and we were even able to get a feel for it on the controller and say, yeah, this is going to feel good, this is going to be easy to get to. We had a lot of menus and transitions, so we had things happening where you saw a lot of movement. You can see elements moving from left and right, and you can see when you select an item, menus kind of moving up and out the way and animating a lot. When we spoke to Tynan, he told us the most important thing he had on PC was to get the UI out the way and so the players are never waiting for anything. So we mimicked that. We got rid of any animations, we got rid of any delays that it takes for a user to be able to make a choice. So on RimWorld now, everything is really fast, and if you memorize, because you've played it a lot, you memorize how to get to the architect menu by pressing LBX. You don't have to wait for the menus, just with 2 clicks you're there. You don't even have to look, it's just there and you know you've got the tool. Eventually that evolved into things like the build mode, which just took this abstraction one step further. One of the advantages of using Adobe XD was we could go into the prototype section, grab hold of one of these, move it down and then put it onto the left trigger button of the Xbox controller. So then when I'm actually playing it back, I can just press it and it shows up. And just overall, the whole experience of planning out every screen on XD, building out the full experience before we even hand it over to the developers meant that we were able to get feedback quickly and iterate really quickly. Throughout the evaluation stage and then even moving into development, we were able to get this nice flow between designer, hands-on with QA, hands-on with other play testers, And then once we're ready, we can then hand over to the game face team, we can hand over to the C# team.
I'll take the document, I'll look at anything that's potentially reusable from another design. I will look at it from a dev standpoint and say what could be difficult, what could be reused. Yeah, so basically if there is any inconsistencies, I'll try and make them uniform when I build it. Then once it's developed, I would give you the finished article. So the design comes through, there'll maybe be a few things that we find at the initial stage. Yeah, so we're using a tool called Coherent Game Face, which is basically takes HTML templates and then adapts them for Unity, because there is lots of edge cases that can happen in RimWorld. It's a very immersive game like that. So I basically look at it in XD, then I'll build it in HTML in the browser. It'll look a bit rubbish at that point, but I'll put it through a preview screen we have in Unity, and then that I can see how it will mostly end up looking, and then it goes to a dev and they'll hook up all the interactions, put all the icons and stuff in.
Timing can get hands-on with the prototype, but usually we would have to kind of do it within Game Face and implement it on C#. You'd have to have the dev kit and then install it and then test it and get hands-on and give us feedback, where with XD we can do that first. And then if there's any tweaks because of the way that it's built in Game Face, you can make those tweaks quite rapidly.
Yeah, definitely. From a programming standpoint, I am not a Unity programmer, I'm a front-end developer. I work in web. Yeah. That's where I'm based.
We would start working on researching whatever the PC logic would be and make sure that our screen replicates all the necessary logic so that all the player have access to all the features that they would have access to on PC. Typically I'd go for usability first and make it so that the menu can be navigated and used, and then once I've got that down, I would then implement the actual features, make it so that it interacts with the gameplay as it should. RimWorld's such a deep game that actually researching how a screen works can take several hours just to even understand the code side of things. I think because of the amount of controls that are available to the player on PC, mapping those controls to controller is quite difficult. It tends to, it's not like a first-person shooter where R2 is always shoot no matter what game you play. There's a lot more variability with RimWorld, so keeping track of what the controls do is quite important. It actually can be quite awkward at times.
So previously to Double 11, I worked for Red Bull as a professional esports driver. Yeah, I've basically competed in a professional racing game where I even became the world champion. And at the same time, I also implemented software for them so that we can record our telemetry and analyze our driving. It's like I always wanted to work on games, but when you make a game, it's worldwide for everyone, so you have a potential audience of hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. Like when I learned that I got to work on RimWorld, I was very excited and I was very happy that I can be part of porting this game to console. Basically adapting it to console hardware. There are some limitations compared to a computer. You can't be as free with things, and there are some things that you cannot do, so you need to find workaround and solutions for that. So compared to the software I wrote previously, you already have an existing UI framework which you have on Windows software or Android software, but when you work on games you will always have to code it from scratch. With Unity UI, everything is in C#, so you can be more direct with it. We had to implement a new UI technology from scratch. We were using a new UI middleware which we haven't used before, so we actually had to code the entire basics of it. I check a bug, I check the C# side, I check the JavaScript, and then I can identify if the problem is on my side or on the front-end team. And if I identify that it's a front-end issue, I do notify the front-end team. One thing I like with Game Face is that you can code the animations directly in CSS. So we, the programmers, we don't have to worry about the animations that's already done by the front-end team.
And I think it was really successful in the end. The reviews of the game talked about how good the controls were, how intuitive it all felt. So all of that time we put into the evaluation to just deep dive in, create prototypes, hand it out to people, get feedback, test it on TV, all of that really came together and developed a successful product.